Radhe Radhe. Today is Saturday, 13th June 2026. And here we are to present to you with this recap video for today's Bhagavad Gita study session. As we keep continuing along our journey of chapter 13, we keep uncovering more and more information about God. Along with me, here is Mummy.
Radhe Radhe.
I'll bring up the screen and we'll take a look at the content covered today. After the usual recap quiz that was for last week's content on chapter 13, verses 23 and 24, we then covered today chapter 13, verses 25 and 26. And as we'll show later, we also got through a segment of one of Swamiji's videos. As always, if you take a look at the description for this video, you'll get the link to the free community portal. We did give you more of a walkthrough of the slide structure again for everyone's benefit in the session today. So please go through all the slides. You have all the quiz questions there. You have links in your spare time. There's a section that helps you conquer concepts, calm your mind. So the video we presented was one of the links from last time. And week after week, those are provided, different ones specific to the week's content for your benefit and learning progress. So take the most advantage of that as you can. With that, let us get into chapter 13, verse 25.
ध्यानेन आत्मनि पश्यन्ति केचिद् आत्मानम् आत्मना अन्ये सांख्येन योगेन कर्मयोगेन चापरे.
Chapter 13, verse 25 has the catchphrase honing in on the heart. A little bit of alliteration here, and really that is because we are seeing by Sri Krishna three paths that he mentions that help us hone in or get in that direction of what we are truly seeking, which is something to do with the heart. In fact, as we see in the shloka's translation, those three paths are all for perceiving, attaining, or realizing the Supreme Soul, the Paramatma, who we've been talking about since last week, if not even earlier. And so within the heart, you can get that attainment, perception, or realization through either meditation or the cultivation of knowledge or via the path of action. But again, as we stressed in class, as Mummy mentioned as well, and you've heard this over and over again, that concept of yoga, of bhakti, is absolutely important. So the devotion aspect, the devotion word, that is absolutely necessary over here. So as Swamiji says in the commentary, variety is one of those universal characteristics of God's creation. Everyone is created differently, so you have different interests, different inclinations or tendencies. So if I go here, remember propensities, English word that we have seen several times, but just to again revisit in your dictionaries, propensities, inclinations or tendencies. Here it is, propensities for realizing the supreme. So because of all these different inclinations, different behavioral traits, the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedic scriptures, etc., all provide different sets of instructions to cater to that variety. So some want to bring their mind under control. Certain sadhaks wish to do that. So that is the meditation aspect. But again, it's not meditation on stillness or air or nature. Those are aspects of God as well. But here it is on the Lord's names, forms, abodes, pastimes, etc. That's one path. The second path is you want to exercise your intellect. You like analytics, analysis, sankhya, the distinction between the soul and the body, the mind, the intellect, the ego. So in that case, then you also have that threefold concept of true learning that we have talked about. Shravan, which is hearing or listening, Manan, which is contemplation, and then to really practice, implement, internalize that, Nidhi Dhyasan. So that's the second path. And finally, third path is we have a lot of energy, we have interest, we would want to work for the Lord and his enjoyment. We serve the Lord. So that's the Karm Yogin path, that is working for the pleasure of the Lord. Utilize all energy in service of the Lord. Again, all that, of course, helps us choose which path we like, which is suited to us, perhaps, and hopefully then get towards that realization of the Supreme Soul. As you recall, with the flyer we showed in the class, The question was with the homophone here, soul, S-O-L-E, which soul path might lead you to the joy that you seek in the heart? Well, what we seek in the heart is the supreme soul, S-O-U-L. Here, there is a path that is for meditation in the center. On the left, you can see Sankhyena, the path of intellect, knowledge. And then on the right, you see Karma Yogena, the path of action, the path of work, as an offering, as a service to the Lord. If you look carefully, all of them actually lead to that same person, in this case, with Paramatma realized in the heart. And so that soul, S-O-L-E, that's a bit of a trick here. It's actually any of these three paths that can do it. But you pick one, you pick a soul, a single path, and then we all try to work on that. And that leads us to the realization at some stage of the Supreme Soul in the heart. We'll next look at chapter 13, verse 26.
अन्ये त्व एवम् अजानन्तः श्रुत्वान्येभ्य उपासते तेऽपि चातितरन्तेव मृत्युं श्रुतिपरायणाः.
Chapter 13, verse 26 has the catchphrase here as discourses to devotion. There is a hyphen there for a specific reason, as we discussed in the session. Yes, without the hyphen, it is discourses to devotion, absolutely, because Sri Krishna tells us about certain people who've had the benefit of listening to a discourse from a saint, and then they join the path of devotion. The other aspect here is by putting the hyphen, it also stresses on courses. Courses here in terms of not just lectures, but also a course, a route, or a route. And that is because we're talking about paths to realizing the Supreme Soul, Paramatma. So this is now yet another course, another path, hearing from saints, and you get your courses, your discourses to devotion. So as this verse goes, we mentioned in the session as well, chapter 4, verse 34, if you remember, approach, inquire, render, popular and famous verse for many people. Approach a guru, a God-realized saint, inquire with reverence, and then render service. Many people quote that. I think this one is a very important one to pay homage as well to one's guru. Chapter 13, verse 26, a saint, even with all of their humility, they nevertheless would appreciate that this verse Sri Krishna has is giving that true credit to saints, that some people unknowingly, unaware, they get in touch with them and they hear a discourse, a lecture, or something from a saint, and then they get attached to that path of devotion, and eventually they're able to cross over that ocean of birth and death. So Swamiji quotes here from the Bhagavatam. He has a story of Parikshit and Sukhdev. And again, in conclusion, Swamiji, for the commentary, talks about the elements that a sadhak, a practitioner, needs on this path of sadhana. And again, we talked about faith, enthusiasm, that steadfast fast focus. And those are foundation stones, as Swamiji says, on which the palace of devotion stands. Mummy, I'll pass it over to you now to enlighten us also on these verses and enhance our Sanskrit vocabulary, please.
Yeah, thank you, Gagan. So let's look at the word Atmani from verse 25. Atmani means within one's heart. So, what is this verse telling us? The important thing is that we are trying to see within our hearts who is there? The Supreme Soul. Okay, now how do we start realizing that that Supreme Soul is seated within us? So there are different paths based on the temperaments of people. You see, that is what Sri Krishna is saying, that there are different authentic spiritual paths to realize the Supreme Soul within oneself depending on an individual's temperament and capacity. So, some people they like to do dhyan, meditation. Through dhyan, meditation, they are able to see God seated within them. There are some who like philosophical inquiry, discrimination, and cultivation of spiritual wisdom. That is Gyan Yog. Through Gyan Yog, they try to see God seated within them. And there are some others who want to do just selfless action, which is very important, doing their duties without attachment to the results and offering all their actions to the divine. So, the core message in this verse is that Krishna is emphasizing spiritual inclusivity. Okay, he notes that because human beings possess diverse psychological constitutions and tendencies, what Gagan said as propensities, there is no single path that is prescribed. Okay, whether through contemplation, philosophy, or active service, all sincere efforts they lead to the same destination, and that destination is realizing the divine presence within. Now, from verse number 26, let's look at the words. Number one is ajanantaha. Ajanantaha means those who are unaware of spiritual paths. Okay, there are people who have no idea, you know. But what happens? Shruti Parayana. Shruti Parayana means devotion to hearing from saints. It just happens by luck, by chance. They, end up meeting a saint. They enter a temple where a discourse is going on. And just by listening to that discourse, something happens in them and the faith arises, and by listening to the spiritual authorities, they start engaging in devotion. And just through that, also, they can transcend the cycle of birth and death. So, what is very important here, Krishna is saying this power of hearing, that is Shravana Bhakti. So, this verse is highlighting that one does not need to be a scholarly philosopher to attain spiritual liberation. Simply listening to and absorbing wisdom from realized souls, that is a valid and potent path. Just by listening to discourses from a realized saint, then faith and practice, then by faithfully hearing about the divine and then acting upon those teachings with devotion. That is why the word upasate has also come in one of these verses. That means you have that devotion. And then even common individuals can overcome the ocean of material existence and death. And then there is universality of grace. That is what, you know, Lord Krishna, he, he has so much grace that he includes everybody. He ensures that even ordinary people, they also get his grace when they are willing to listen faithfully to a spiritual authority and then apply what they learn. So let's see, Swamiji has quoted in these verses, in verse number 25, he says, Sa vidya tanmatirya. That means true knowledge is that which helps us develop love for God. The fulfillment of karma occurs when it is done for the pleasure of the Lord. So that means when we increase our knowledge, our wisdom about God, and we do selfless karma, when we do karma for God only, for the pleasure of God. Okay, so it helps attaching our mind to God. And then in verse number 26, Swamiji has quoted from Bhagavatam, where King Parikshit had asked the question that how can we purify the undesirable entities in our hearts? There are these enemies which are living in our hearts, that is lust, anger, greed, envy, hatred. And then Shukdev ji replied. What did he say? He said, शृण्वतां स्वकथा कृष्ण पुण्यश्रवणाकीर्तनः हृदयन्तस्थो ह्यभद्राणि विधुनोति सुहृतसताम्. Shukdev ji said, Parikshit, just simply hear the descriptions of the divine names, forms, pastimes, virtues, abodes, and saints of God from a saint. This will naturally cleanse the heart of the unwanted dirt of endless lifetimes. And yes, it is very, very helpful. Just by listening from a saint, all the pastimes and divine names of God, it helps us purify our heart. And that is what we have learned, that we have to prepare the vessel of our heart. Only when the vessel of heart is prepared, that is when we can go near God. That is when God graces us. So that is what devotion provides, that force which enables the sadhak to shrug aside the inertia of material consciousness and cut through the obstacles on the path of sadhana, because on the path of sadhana there are lots and lots of obstacles. It is not easy, but what happens when we are really enthusiastic about devotion, when we listen to when we faithfully listen to discourses from a realized saint, descriptions of divine names, forms, pastimes, virtues, abodes, and saints of God. That is when it helps us to purify the vessel of our heart, and all the obstacles are gone. And that is when God graces us with His true love and bliss. Over to you, Gagan.
Thank you, Mommy. Yep, indeed. That covers chapter 13, verses 25 and 26. So, all of our listeners, hopefully you're ready now for homework. So, note this down. Straightforward question, but certainly hope that you go through the right sources in the past, week or so, and just determine the answer to this question. How many arms does Paramatma have? When you think about Paramatma, indwelling Supreme Soul in our hearts, you now have seen perhaps in multiple places that we have presented, but give the answer as to how many arms he has. So put that please in a comment to the video and we can engage in dialogue over there. Regardless, continue your spiritual journeys and we shall meet next time, which is Saturday, 20th June 2026, 8 a.m. Central Time, 6:30 p.m. India time. Thank you so much. Radhe Radhe.
Radhe Radhe.